I live in the Poconos with my wife and kids, and there's a small lake about a quarter-mile away from our backyard. I used to take my kids down there to go swimming, but after what happened last week, I'm never letting them go down there again. I haven't told anyone about this because I fear sounding crazy. It was last Saturday when we went over to the lake and set up our chairs on the sandy shore. It's like a little private beach in our own backyard, and it's been a wonderful place for us. My wife and I were relaxing in our beach chairs, enjoying the sun while our kids were playing in the water. I always remind them not to go too deep since they're still young, 6 and 8 years old. We spent a good 2 hours there. None of us really in the mood to get wet. Eventually, my wife grew tired and decided to walk back home. I agreed to stay a bit longer with the kids as they were still having a blast playing in the sand and water. The sun was setting by this point, and I was getting a bit tired myself. I noticed that they had gone a bit too deep into the water, so I called out for them to come back closer to the shore. Unfortunately, they couldn't hear me over their laughter and splashing around. I stood up and moved closer to the water to call them again, and that's when I noticed something strange in the water. There was a black, roundish object moving towards my kids. Panic set in, and I ran into the water, shouting for them to come out. I managed to get them out of the water safely, but when I turned back to look, the mysterious object was gone. My kids were confused, and I wasn't sure what to tell them, so I just said it was time to head home. As we packed up and walked back home, I couldn't shake off the feeling of discomfort from what I had witnessed. The strange object in the water was unlike any sea creature I had ever seen. When we got home, dinner was waiting for us, but I couldn't eat properly. I was lost in thought about that object in the water and whether or not to share it with my wife. She noticed that I was eating slowly and asked what was wrong. I decided not to tell her at that moment. After dinner, I grabbed a flashlight and headed back down to the lake. By then, it was already dark outside. I reached the lake, not really knowing what I was looking for. I shone the flashlight across the water's surface, searching for any signs of the strange black object. Suddenly, I heard a loud splash coming from the lake, as if something had emerged from the water. My mind went to the idea of an animal in the lake, but what I saw was far from that. I shone the flashlight around, trying to find the source of the sound, and then I saw it. A silhouette of a humanoid figure with long black hair covering its face. It stood there, facing me, but not necessarily looking at me, or at least I couldn't tell. Terrified, I dropped the flashlight and sprinted back to the house, slamming the door shut behind me. I haven't told anyone about this experience, but what haunts me is that the lake is just a quarter-mile away from my house. For all I know, that thing could be watching me through my window right now as I write this. I have a vague memory of this incident from when I was a young child. Around 7 years old, my room in our old house was on its own floor, almost like an attachment to the attic or a closet type room. The previous owners used it as a playroom for their daughters. The room also had a huge closet door that led into the attic. This closet was elevated, so you needed to climb a set of wooden stairs to access it. The sliding door was quite large, and the closet itself was filled with toys and childhood belongings. I often felt scared being so isolated from the rest of my family, especially with the large closet in my room. Then one night, after watching a scary movie with my family, I lay in bed feeling afraid. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a toy falling over in the closet. Startled, I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents' room. They reassured me that there was no one in my closet, but they saw how frightened I was, so they let me sleep in their room that night. The following night, the memory had faded a bit until I heard the noise again. The sound of a container of Legos spilling out in the closet. Once more, I rushed to my parents' room to tell them what happened. My dad was becoming impatient with my fears, but he reluctantly allowed me to sleep in their room again. The next day, my mom and I checked the closet, and sure enough, there was a pile of Legos spilled on the floor. I thought this was evidence that someone had been in my closet, but my mom reassured me that it was just an accident. That night, my dad locked his door, clearly frustrated with my fears. However, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in silence, my imagination running wild, waiting for another sound to come from the closet. About an hour later, it happened, shattering the silence. The closet door rolled open forcefully. The moonlight streaming through my window revealed a figure standing by the closet door. I let out an piercing scream, overcome with pure terror, a feeling that still haunts me today. The figure leapt down from the closet and dashed out of my room, then out the front door of the house. My mom rushed up to my room in shock, while my dad ran downstairs to try and catch the intruder. Unfortunately, he was never able to apprehend the man, and the police never managed to capture him either. In 8th grade, I participated in a school trip called the Louisiana Tour. This tour involved visiting significant sites in South Louisiana. Among the places we visited was Myrtle's Plantation, renowned as one of the most haunted locations in the country. Numerous stories circulate about the place. During our visit, we were gathered as a part of a larger group in a room, and the tour guide was discussing something. I can't recall the topic. While standing there, an unusual sound reached my ears, resembling the striking of a piano key. After hearing it a couple of times, I began scanning the surroundings to identify the source. Even though I didn't spot a piano, the sound persisted. Intrigued, I turned to my friends who were nearby and asked if they heard it too. To my surprise, they answered negatively. When the sound repeated, I exclaimed, "There it is," again, assuming they would hear it this time. But my friends thought I was imagining things. Frustrated, I continued searching the room. Most of the people were focused on the tour guide, except for one woman who caught my attention. She motioned toward me, and then to her ear, as if inquiring if I had heard the sound as well. I nodded in agreement, as the tour guide delved into a story about a deceased soldier associated with the place, mentioning that he played the piano and that various guests had reported hearing his music at night. I was left thoroughly perplexed. Truth be told, I still don't know what to make of it. Before leaving the room, I approached the woman and struck up a conversation. She confirmed hearing the same mysterious sound as I did. However, her husband and son had not perceived it at all.